what are the options I have, what's going to be the most reliable, and what's going to be more cost effective, and how can you ensure that I am also able to track that shipment. So
and I want a good show, damn it. Ready for a good show?
Doing awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you, Angie. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I've always been big into archery, and my dad said, "Hey, you guys want to start an archery store?"
Yes, that's how it is.
Yes, of course. Let's do this together.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the E-Comm Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the E-Comm Show. I am your host, Andrew Maff, as usual, and today I am joined by the amazing Tom Byun, who is the North American president over at Sendle. Tom, how you doing? You ready for a good show?
yeah, I'm very excited. Thanks for having me on, Andrew.
Yeah, super excited to have you on. Really looking forward to this one. Love talking about everything between operations all the way into shipping, and it's gonna be super fun. So let's kick it off. The usual way I always like to do this: pretend that no one knows who you are, no one knows anything about Sendle, and let you kind of do a little bit of an introduction. So why don't you tell us a little about yourself, a little about Sendle, and we'll take it from there. Okay?
Sounds great. Yeah. So, as you noted, I head up our North America business. We're a carrier both in the U.S. and Canada. So I'll talk about that a bit. But I've been in the e-commerce space actually quite some time. I started out my career at Yahoo. There used to be something called Yahoo Small Business. So I used to
Throwback.
run our Yahoo Stores business. I was the GM overseeing that business. So very familiar with e-commerce, and that's where I kind of got my first foray into e-commerce. From there, I then went into a couple of other companies. I was at a company called LivePerson, which provided chat messaging. A lot of it was around e-commerce as well, helping retailers and online businesses, do live support and marketing. And then over the last 5-10 years, I've been also at some of the larger companies like Google. Before I came to Sendle, I was at Facebook, which eventually became Meta. And I was also responsible for heading up our go-to-market for Facebook's e-commerce efforts when we started launching what's called shops on Facebook and Instagram. So I was responsible for driving that rollout across our massive audience of SMB customers across the various portfolio of businesses at Meta. And then fast forward, after that, I joined Sendle. It was a great opportunity to join a company on a mission to really help SMBs. And it's very much a mission that I've believed in many years I've been in, and where oftentimes you feel like small businesses often get the short end of the stick. They don't always have the great option. They don't have the best prices, whether you're talking about a software product or you're talking about shipping. And in this case, Jim Moody, who is our founder, who founded the company back in 2014 in Australia, realized like there is not a great cost efficient, reliable shipping option, particularly in Australia in that case, when he was running a secondhand business for shipping. So he decided to launch a carrier. And fast forward into the US, when we launched 2019, essentially rolled out we are as a carrier to help small businesses really have an alternate carrier option versus kind of your run-of-the-mill players out there. And especially because they don't often have the economies of scale. So we wanted to make sure that we're providing pricing that's competitive. And I'd be glad to go into also how, shipping is very expensive for a lot of small businesses and why I think we're providing true value here. So.
Yeah, beautiful. So I know there is, at least in their space, there's a handful of competitors. There's also the bigger, like you have the UPS and the FedEx and things like that. How do you differentiate yourselves from a 3PL, from the UPS, the FedExes of the world? Like what's the process like, and where do you stand?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, as you noticed, there are what's called 3PLs. There's what you often also call aggregators. These are platforms that provide multiple carriers and provide shipping rates and print labels. We actually partner with a fair amount of them, both whether you call them the shipping platform aggregators or 3PLs, but we are essentially an end-to-end carrier. We're here We take out a lot of the guesswork. If you're a small business, whether you are sending one package or 20 or 200 or more per month, whether that's in US or Canada, we are a carrier, much like UPS or USPS or or FedEx. And we have everything from a 3-day guaranteed all the way through, kind of the longer haul, like 8-day, kind of up to about 8-day type of a solution. And we provide also customer support, tracking. And how do we do this? We actually do this by actually building what we call a multi-carrier network. We work with a bunch of partners and carriers to make sure that we optimize the best really route and pricing and reliable option. But again, as I mentioned, we try to take a lot of that lift out for you as a small business. It's all about you as a small business. How do I get? What are the options I have? What's going to be the most reliable, and what's going to be more cost effective, and how can you ensure that I am also able to track that shipment? So, and in that sense, we are a carrier much like any other carriers out there.
Interesting. So that obviously stems a very slightly different question. At the time of this airing, it would have been long gone, but we did just find out, I think it was today or yesterday, the UPS will not be going on a strike. Yeah. So we're all clean and clear there. But can you explain a little bit what would have happened if they actually went into a strike? Because that is, as far as I know, I can't remember the last time that ever happened. If it ever happened, I don't even know. So can you tell us a little bit about like what would have happened, and then obviously what the benefit of having something like a Sendle in place would have helped from that situation?
For sure. And obviously the news hit the wire yesterday. And this did happen. Again, I'm trying to trace back, but it's been a while. But there wasn't a while back where there was a major strike, and it was highly disruptive. A couple of things I would say, again, someone who's not necessarily a veteran in the shipping space, but as I've learned and kind of seen what goes on, and I talked to a lot of small businesses day to day, as well as some of the larger merchants. One of the things that would have happened is that, particularly if you're a larger shipper, you are, in many instances, many of the larger shippers or the larger commerce businesses are diversified. They're using, let's say, UPS or FedEx or one of the regional carriers. Mm-hmm. In the case of a lot of small businesses, carrier diversification, or it's like a foreign term. I don't even know what that means. And so I think one of the impacts that you would have seen is one, for sure, whether you're a small business all the way up to a large business, there would have been some major impact, because UPS, drives and delivers, a huge amount of volume across the U.S. So if a strike would have happened, it would have been, quite crippling, and it would have meant both us, FedEx and other carriers would have definitely helped pick up the lift. But having said that, it would have also been pretty crippling for a lot of businesses that just have not set up to, have alternative carriers. The other thing I would have noted, I think small businesses would have been also impacted more, because they, they're often now, they don't, again, as I mentioned, they don't have these great contracts with FedEx or others where they can have better pricing. And this is where I think Sendle would have been extremely valuable. But even now, even the strike is not likely to happen. There's still benefit today. Again, I think whether it's now or in the future, what we call diversification is something that's important for small businesses, regardless of whether there's a strike. Sometimes it could be some natural disaster that happens. It could be some other event that happens. And you want to make sure that whether you are using USPS, Sendle, or any other carriers, you think about making sure that you've got alternative options. And we saw this also during the pandemic, where there was a meteoric rise, and there was, definitely a lot of demand, and capacity was really very, very much stretched. So,
Gotcha. So let me just make sure I have this right. So basically what happens, let's assume I'm an e-commerce seller. I'm shipping out a product. Maybe I have it at a warehouse. I use something like a Sendle to help me figure out the diversification of these different carriers, and then the crazy pricing and stuff that they have. And then through there, that basically gets essentially mapped out through that direction. Is that more or less in the right area?
I would actually even simplify it further. If you are a merchant today, and let's say you are shipping, one of our customers actually does, they build wooden toys. I have a customer that also sell supplements, so we have customers, a variety of different ranges, and they're looking to ship something, say from Chicago to New York, or, something maybe from Canada to US. They're going to go to Sendle.com, and actually look at different rates and then essentially print the labels, and someone will come by to pick up their shipment, or they can drop it off as well. So it's really very straightforward. We are not a what you call a rate shopping platform, meaning you're not going to go on Sendle and try to find FedEx or UPS rates. That's what someone like ShipStation or ShipRush, their platforms are out there. We work with them.
Yeah.
We actually are a carrier that will show up, that you become available on these platforms as well. The other benefit I did want to mention, I didn't, I've omitted, is we are also 100% carbon neutral. So one of the things that I
was going to get to that one.
over years, and yeah, I've heard this from merchants too, is like, hey, that carbon neutral option is actually appealing to me, but also to people that are buying my products. And I think that's another thing I did want to mention as well.
Yeah. And now that's a really big push, right? Like I would imagine that is got to be a really big selling point, simply because there's a ton of brands out there that are going to, the carbon neutral shipping, the, sustainable packaging, that kind of stuff. Like in fact, we had someone on the show a few months ago that was discussing that was what they were doing. And it's going to kill me that I can't remember their name. But so I know that whole approach becomes a really big marketing aspect for a lot of the different sellers. So how do you map that out? How are you able to kind of like facilitate that?
Yeah, sure. There's a couple things that we do. One, let me also just provide some context because I think the magnitude of carbon emissions and everyone obviously now reading about warmer climate and what's happening. And I'll share a couple of stats. Obviously, e-commerce has accelerated significantly, and e-commerce shipping alone could grow from like 3 to 17% of global greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So that's just going to continue to grow. And one of the ways we as a company are not only educating shippers, as you noted, like use, maybe compostables or reuse repackaging. There's things you can do as a commerce merchant that you should be doing with your packaging options and shipping options. Second, we actually, as a company, what we do is we do a carbon offset today. So, for example, for every product you ship, we do an offset. We work with a company called South Pole, where they reinvest in, projects in different parts of the world that helps offset emissions. Now, that is one thing we're doing. I spoke at a conference in Washington, D.C. A while back, where I also mentioned Sendle as a company is also looking at going what's called carbon net zero, meaning beyond what you call carbon offsetting. We're also looking at our operation, everything from how we actually you work with partners or using green fleets, et cetera. But how do we make sure that we are actually reducing carbon emissions through our operation and getting to net zero as well?
Wow. So so the entire company, just the operations, is actually attempting to go into a complete net zero for that whole direction. So that's got to be a pretty big lift, right?
Yeah, it's a big lift. I mean, our goal is to get there by 2030. So it's not a easy overnight lift. Yeah, we have some time. But we've started mapping out our strategy there. We're looking at everything from how the partners we work with, the carriers we work with, as well as how our employees are staffed and what kind of software we're using as well. So across the board, we're trying to map out what our mission is and how do we get to net zero, as I mentioned.
Nice. So what about shipping times? It's a big issue. It's we do a lot of work with like D2C sellers selling on their own website who are constantly battling Amazon and trying to get to people's stuff in like 2 or 3 days or whatever it is now. Right. And that's a constant headache of people are, they want to place an order on a website, but then they got to wait like a week or two before it shows up. And they're so used to Amazon that becomes a problem. One of the things I was asking about was the shipping time. So I know you have the Amazon of the world, obviously, that's getting stuff to people in like a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever. And so what's the shipping times like? How are people able to get to, they want to see basically what I'm trying to get at. We have these D2C sellers all the time that are like, I want to get stuff to our customers so much faster because otherwise, why wouldn't they just go to Amazon? And so what is the shipping time like if they're working with Sendle? Is there any kind of option on how fast they can get to someone? Like, what's that whole process like?
Yeah, sure. I'll actually answer two things. One, I'll talk about our options, and then two, some of the trends I'm seeing with shippers as well as like consumers and the option they're looking for. So with Sendle, we have everything from what we call the 3-day guarantee. So we'll guarantee that it'll go and get there to you in 3 days. If not, we actually
Oh,
refund
beautiful.
you shipping cost all the way up. And then we have what's called Saver, which is our kind of economical option, all the way to what we'll call preferred. And Saver usually will get there in between about 2 to 8 days. One of the things that we do is we want to make sure we're providing options. And so again, in the case maybe some of the shipper you highlighted, there's someone who wants to get a document to someone the next day, or it's a perishable item, or whatever it might be. They want to make sure it gets there in a couple of days or a day or less. So we have a couple options there. One other thing I do want to highlight is there was kind of that mantra over the last 5-10 years around faster is always better. And one of the things we're seeing is it actually depends. We're finding that there's a consumer sentiment and recognition that with faster shipment options, sometimes there is carbon emission impact as well. Secondly, is that
Sure.
For things like returns, and as I work with both companies that are providing return options, sometimes slower is okay. And because either as a company, an e-commerce merchant, I'm less concerned about how fast it comes back to me, and also as a consumer, it doesn't matter to me. So it really depends, and I think having options is important. But I agree that kind of the expedited option is important. That's why we introduced 3-day and make sure we have an offering that's also competitive to UPS and other carriers out there.
Gotcha. How does it work if someone's leveraging a 3PL, or they can obviously if they need Sendle to do the pickup and everything, that's just another option as if they were to pick like a UPS or a FedEx or something like that, correct?
That is correct. So as I mentioned, we do work with 3PLs. We also work with platforms that allow you to do rate shopping, and we are another carrier that just will appear on there. You can also get all the benefits like tracking your shipments once you actually go through those partners, those shipping partners as well. Yeah.
So what if you have multiple 3PLs? Because I know from a delivery perspective, if you've got, basically the whole reason Amazon's able to get stuff to people so fast because they have warehouses all over the country. So if you're a large enough seller and you've got, let's say, several warehouses across the country, are there ways for them to offer different pricing tiers based on where that product is in a certain 3PL? Like, how does that process work?
Yeah, actually, twofold. One is we do work with very, I would say what we'll call small, medium merchants, or some that are doing, say, thousands of volume per day. If you are going to be, someone that actually has multiple warehouses and doing, say, over, 10, 20, 30,000 shipments a month, may not necessarily be the best solution, because we started with the premise of like, let's serve with the small business all the way up to growing small business as well. The second thing I would highlight is if you are working with the 3PL, as I mentioned, we work with multiple carriers, and that's why we have a multi-carrier network. So that if you've got your shipment going from one place to another, and you may have again, we take the guesswork out of like which carriers you may want to use. If you have multiple warehouses and your shipment is going, and you're working with the 3PL, we will work with the technical partner, but we're not necessarily designed for companies, again, with very, very vast, complex infrastructure.
Yeah.
I like that.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. So where do you see this going as time goes on? Obviously, Sendle continuing to expand. Like, what is the next step? I clearly you're going into the whole net zero carbon neutral thing, so that's awesome. Yeah. But we got some time on that one. So what's the next step? How is Sendle kind of expanding from there?
Yeah, a couple of ways, and I'm very super excited about having joined Sendle, and as we continue to grow in the U.S. We recently launched in Canada, and I talk to customers every day, and they're giving me feedback. Tom, like, I'm glad there's actually an alternate carrier to what we call the incumbents, and you're providing very low pricing, reliable. And not only that, you're providing good customer support. We provide customer support 24/7. Where's my shipment? Where's my parcel? That's often like the most, basic question someone asks. And we have provide support to do that. So I think we want to make sure we're continuing to get that story out there, because I think a lot of folks still don't know Sendle. So I think we have an opportunity to continue to kind of, get the name out there and make sure we're helping small businesses. The second thing I would highlight is, and as you probably well know, covering e-commerce and working with merchants that also may be shipping to Canada, and also, maybe Canadian companies shipping to US. One of the things that we know is that we want to make sure that we're also providing a great option for people that are doing cross-border shipping. So that's an area that we have, we launched in Canada last fall. We introduced cross-border shipping earlier this part of this year. And so I think that's something that we're going to continue to invest in and make sure we're providing that offering, because e-commerce is not only a domestic business, it is a cross-border business. And it's something that we're going to be focusing on. One quick stat, we did a survey last fall, and with Canadians, and something like, I think almost 3/4 of Canadians said they were frustrated with courier services in Canada. Nearly 2/3 of Canadian consumers have abandoned their shopping carts because of the shipping costs. And so I think we wanted to make sure that we would provide an alternative offering to small businesses, whether they're, that are shipping domestically in Canada, but also shipping from Canada to the US as well.
That's awesome, because I know that is a major complaint. We talk about it all the time about sellers that are looking to kind of start to venture into going a little bit more international. And obviously, if you're in the States, Canada's a very likely next step. Or if you're in Canada, the States is obviously a very likely next step. So it sounds like it's pretty nice that you can actually figure out a really inexpensive way to get some shipping done, because that was always the biggest complaint, was like, we can't do it because of the price point.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. And it's a particularly pain point from Canada to US or within Canada. So we're addressing that. I think US international, I think, we have a product that's available today. We ship to 180 countries, but that's an area that we will continue to invest in the future as well.
That's awesome. Tom, thank you so much. Really appreciate you having on the show. It's ton of information. Very awesome. Really appreciate it. I'd love to give you an opportunity, let everyone know where they can find out more about you, and then of course more about Sendle.
Great. Yeah, you can look us up on sendle.com, and that's where you'll get all the information, everything I highlighted around, from carbon neutral, all of our activities, all the way through our Saver Preferred and 3-day guaranteed product, and all the great things that we provide for small businesses. Thanks for having me on today. It was super exciting.
Yeah, thank you as well. Obviously, everyone who tuned in, thank you also. Please make sure you do the usual and rate, review, subscribe on whichever podcast platform you prefer, or head over to the E-Comm Show to check out all of our previous episodes. But as usual, thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. How you going?
Thank you for tuning in to the E-Comm Show. Head over to ecommshow.com to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform or on the BlueTuskr YouTube channel. The E-Comm Show is brought to you by BlueTuskr, a full-service digital marketing company specifically for e-commerce sellers looking to accelerate their growth. Go to BlueTuskr.com now for more information. Make sure to tune in next week for another amazing episode of the E-Comm Show.